What's up, YouTube? Welcome to another episode of Demisplains, where this time I'll be explaining the concept of double dipping and what it means for Path of Exile as of patch 2.5. Now, double dipping is a phrase that's thrown around a lot in the community and thrown around a lot on, say, Reddit or the forums or whatever, and sometimes it's used correctly, sometimes it's used incorrectly. What double dipping actually means, and when GGG refers to double dipping, what they're referring to is a damage modifier that is applied to the same thing twice. Now that sounds relatively simple, but it's very complex actually in the way that what it actually means. So, the main culprits of double dipping in this game currently are poison, bleed, and ignite. The reason those things are the main culprits are because we'll start with ignites, for example. So say you are a fire-based character, you can scale your damage with things like, increased damage, increased fire damage, increased elemental damage, all of those things, scale your damage. So say you're using Flame Blast. Those, say you just do increased fire damage. Increased fire damage scales the damage of your Flame Blast, and then if your Flame Blast ignites something, the modifier for increased fire damage also applies to the ignite. So it applies twice. That is double dipping. Now, on the reason why things like Doriani's Catalyst are so popular, the elemental damage is applied twice to things like ignite. So say you have... what is this? So you have two of these, which is a popular thing for the Flame Blast Elementalist right now because of this, unintentionally or not. You get nearly 130% increased elemental damage. That applies to your initial hit of the Flame Blast, and then that increased elemental damage is then applied again when you ignite something to the ignite's damage over time. Other sources of that generic type of increased damage, for instance, the dual-wielding Blade Flurry Scourge poison build. Scourge itself gives you 70% increased minion damage, and then increases to minion damage also affects you. That 70% increased damage is kind of a generic damage type, so it increases the damage of your initial hit, and then when you inflict a poison or a bleed or something onto somebody, it also increases the damage of that poison and bleed. So that double dips as well. If you had two of these, you would get 140% increased generic minion damage, which scales your hit, and then the bleed and the poison or whatever else you're doing afterwards, or ignites in this instance, for example. So, that means that if you want to fully exploit double dipping, you can look for those generic type modifiers on your jewels, on your gear, on your tree, whatever. Like for instance, for Flame Blast, if you pick up these generic increased fire damage nodes, that scales your ignite and the initial hit, same as up here. And then other things that do that, this is where it starts getting a little bit more complex. Things like area damage, minion damage, trap and mine damage, projectile damage, those are all double dipping effects. So on jewels, for instance, you have this jewel here. It says minions deal increased damage. If you have a minion that is also poisoning on hit, this increased damage will scale the initial hit, and then it'll also apply the modifier again to the poison. In this instance, it has increased projectile damage. If your projectile applies bleed, poison, or ignite, this will increase the initial hit, and then it'll also apply again to the bleed, poison, ignite. This one is just generic increased damage, so this would apply to any of those three things. It would scale the initial hit, and then it would also apply the increased damage to the bleed, poison, and ignite. This one, increased fire damage, that's for the ignite specifically, so your initial hit and then the ignite would be scaled twice. This one, area damage, is another source of the double dipping. So this would scale the initial hit, and then the area damage would also apply to the bleed, poison, ignite if it's applied by the skill that's area damage. This one, increased physical damage, so we'll start with that. This is specifically for bleed. If you're inflicting bleed with a physical damaging attack, this would scale the initial hit, and then the increased physical damage also applies to the bleed afterwards, so it would scale twice. That's double dipping, once again. This one, increased chaos damage. This is for poison specifically. So say you're playing the King of the Forest Barrage poison build, right? Most of your damage is just straight up poison damage on hit. Chaos damage on hit. So that scales your hit damage, but then increased chaos damage also scales the poison's damage over time. So it double dips. This one is actually a triple double dipping jewel. Increase for the barrage builds. For a poison chaos build specifically. So say you were like full fire to chaos damage Flame Blast or something like that with dual consuming darks and Infernal Mantle. this would be a triple double dipping jewel for you. It would scale your initial chaos hit, and then it would also scale your poison with the damage chaos area damage. That's insane. So I hope you guys understand double dipping a little bit more. I hope it helps you min-max your builds a little bit more. GG has said that they are intending to fix this within the next couple patches. Hopefully by 3.0 this is removed from the game, because it's unintentional. Damage modifiers are only supposed to be able to apply once. But that being said, I don't know, I hope this helps. If you have any other ideas for Demi-Splains videos, if you need anything explained in the game, leave it in the comments below and I'll get it around for the next video series. That is Demi out.